You know, there was a time when I could speak to a couple thousand people for a long time without referring to a note, and I can't do that anymore, so I have to read my speech, but I wrote this for you and had a wonderful dinner last night with several of the people at the college and learned a lot about you and tried to come up with something that maybe would explain what inside the mind of Alzheimer's is. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I thank you for your range of generous contributions to benefit the care and support and research efforts in finding a cure for Alzheimer's. I couldn't stand here before you today without your collective efforts. Yet we still have a long way to go in research and funding and fighting the stereotype that Alzheimer's is your grandfather's disease. As I said before, there's a feeling it's the final stage in a nursing home where one just stares at a wall. And yes, my grandfather died of Alzheimer's, but the disease can take 20 to 25 years to run its serpentine course. It's like having a sliver of your brain shaved every day as this enemy progresses. It's a story that could be yours someday, or the story of a loved one. It's been said that in 25 years there will be two types of people in the world, those with Alzheimer's and those caring for someone with Alzheimer's. You know, to fight an enemy, one must study the enemy and have working strategies in place. As the author of The Art of War, the ancient Chinese general Sun Tzu once counseled, quote, "Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." As French journalist Jean-Baptiste Carr observed in the early 1800s, quote, "The more things change, the more they remain the same." My life is slowly changing, yet it remains the same, a slow demise of who I once was. On bad days, I feel a shadow of myself, like in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, where nothing would be what it is because everything would be what it isn't. Just to give you an analogy of this disease, because as a journalist I try to boil it down to its lowest common denominator. How many people in the audience have ever lived in a house with a basement? Raise your hand. I figured. And how many people in the audience have ever done their laundry in the basement? Raise your hand. And how many people have been in the basement at night doing your laundry when someone up in the kitchen didn't know you were there and shut the light off? Raise your hand. Okay. What do? You yell, scream. I carpet bomb F-bombs. But that's Alzheimer's in the early stage. The light is on, the light goes off, and you never know when it's going to go on and off. But you do know that one day there'll be no one up in the kitchen to turn the light back on, and then it goes off forever. So while I can, I want to educate in the best way. As an investigative reporter, now struggling with this disease, and one that has decimated my family tree, I studied this enemy and devised strategy and wrote the book on Pluto, Inside the Mind of Alzheimer's. It's the first book written by a reporter embedded inside the mind of Alzheimer's, chronicling the progression of his own disease. Alzheimer's, as you know, was a calculating, cunning killer. And I know the front line well. It stole my maternal grandfather and my mother. Several months ago, my paternal uncle died of the disease, and before my father's death, he was also diagnosed with dementia. Alzheimer's has now come for me. In 2009, I was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's after experiencing horrific symptoms of short-term memory loss, inability to recognize individuals and places that I've known all my life, difficulty completing simple tasks, terrible judgment, confusion with time and space, withdrawal, and challenges with problem solving and spatial relationships. A battery of clinical tests, brain scans, and a SPECT scan confirmed the diagnosis, which doctors say was accelerated by two serious head traumas that unmasked a disease in the making. I also carry the Alzheimer's marker gene APOE4, which appears to be on both sides of the family. The diagnosis came 2 weeks after I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, which in consult with my doctors and family, I am not treating. It is my exit strategy. I don't want to take my family and friends to that final stage. My book on Pluto chronicles this progression. and my reporting instincts compelled me to document, to compile a blueprint of strategies, faith, and humor, a day-to-day focus on living with Alzheimer's, not dying with it, a hope that all is not lost when it appears to be. As the great Bugs Bunny once said, don't take life too seriously because nobody gets out alive. You can laugh, it's okay. You'll make me feel good. You know, all the darkness in the world, my mother taught me, cannot snuff out a single candle. And I know that darkness. It's a place that I call Pluto, in allegorical terms of reference from my early days as an investigative reporter when I went deep off record with sources. We're heading out to Pluto, I would say, where no one can see or hear what is said. The Pluto metaphor still works for me more than ever as I seek the peace of isolation and pursue the urge to drift out as Alzheimer's overcomes at intervals. Pluto is the perfect place to get lost. Formerly the ninth planet, about 3.1 billion miles from Earth, it is now relegated to dwarf planet status. Pluto's orbit, like Alzheimer's, is chaotic. Its tiny size makes it sensitive to immeasurably small particles of the solar system, hard to predict factors that will gradually disrupt an orbit. Over the years, I've taken close family, colleagues, and clients out to Pluto to discuss off-record unmentionables of life in a place without oxygen. One day, like my grandfather, my mother, my uncle, and my father, I won't return from this dark, icy place. And when that happens, I want family and friends to know where I am. So here's where I am. Today, 60% of my short-term memory can be gone in 30 seconds. I often don't recognize family and friends, including my wife, on 2 occasions. Get lost in familiar places, fly into inexorable rage when the light in my brain goes out. At times I see things that are not there. The most disturbing symptoms of my private darkness are the visual misperceptions, the playful but sometimes disturbing Stephen King hallucinations, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling things that aren't there. It is dispiriting, you know, to lose a thought in a second, 72,000 seconds a day in a 20-hour period of consciousness. To stand exposed and yet stand one's ground, to begin to grasp in fundamental naked terms who one really is, the good, the bad, the ugly. The ugly is haunting to me. The many things that I would like to take back over the years but cannot, feelings of failure and transgression. I rely on copious notes and my trusty iPhone and endless email reminders. I'm startled when my inbox tells me I have 50 new emails, then realize that 35 are from me. The reminders help, but I have no sense of time and place. And sometimes my mind plays games and paints other faces of other people on other people. Rather than panic, I just keep asking questions until I get the answers, or at least avoid yet another awkward episode. I work hard at deflecting the loss of judgment and filter. I find myself becoming more childlike, curiously enjoying moments of innocence and potty talk. It's a reversal of fortune. In college, I was a history major and honor student, good at rote memory, but Mr. Potato Head now. You know, and the hallucinations, at times there are these crawling spider insect-like creatures that crawl regularly, some in sprays of blood, along the ceiling at different times, sometimes in a platoon, that turns at 90-degree angles, then inches a third of the way down the wall before floating toward me. I brush them away, almost in amusement, knowing that they're not real, yet fearful of the cognitive decline. On a recent morning, I saw a bird in my bedroom circling above me in ever tighter orbits. Then precipitously, the dove dove into my chest in a suicide mission. I screamed in horror, but there was no bird, no suicide mission, only my hallucination. To add to this mix and what may be a brush with vascular dementia, I haven't had feelings in parts of my hands and feet and lower arm extremities for almost 2 years. Doctors are running tests. At least in the summer, out on my boat on Pleasant Bay on Cape Cod, I don't feel the bites of those greenheads, those nasty, stinging salt fly marshes that draw blood. So this is a good thing to Alzheimer's. You know, most diseases attack the body, but Alzheimer's also attacks the mind. I am reasonably trim with the reflection of a muscle memory, but doctors have told me that beneath the surface, I may have the body of an 80-year-old. A view confirmed in a recent New England Baptist Hospital diagnosis of acute spinal stenosis and scoliosis, a further degeneration of the spine. Expect more breakdowns, they said, when the brain ceases to send signals. Every night now I sleep in my clothes. It feels secure to me. Often my sneakers are tied at my ankle so I can feel pressure below. Feet don't fail me now, I say. As my brain shrinks, it instinctively makes decisions, experts say, on what functions to power and what functions to power down to preserve fuel. Much like the diabolical HAL 9000, the programmed computer on the spaceship Discovery 1 bound for Jupiter in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. Quote, "I'm sorry, Greg, I'm afraid I can't do it," my HAL-like brain seems to be saying. I'm afraid, my mind is going. I can feel it. My mind is going. There is no question about it. I can feel it. Preserving fuel, I still have feelings on the bottom of my feet for walking and running, yet no feelings on the top of my feet. I have feelings on the bottom of my fingers for keyboarding, but little or no feelings on the top, often up to my elbows. My brain, a.k.a. HAL, may be conserving power. I've been advised sort of a cerebral brownout akin to a drop in vultures in big cities to prevent electrical blackout, intentional or otherwise, may happen. My brain was once a file cabinet, carefully arranged in categories, but at night, as I sleep, it is as someone has ransacked the files, dumping everything onto the cluttered floor. Before I get out of bed in the morning, I have to pick up the files and arrange them in my mind in correct order, envelopes of awareness, reality, family, work, and other elements of life, and then it's off for coffee. I'm a coffee fiend. I love coffee, practically inhale it, a habit from my days in the Boston Herald American newsroom, when I would grab cups of coffee, hot and fresh, and walk from the newsroom down to the press room and back to work in the newsroom to organize a story. In my office on Cape Cod, there's a retro vintage red tin sign that reads, quote, "Coffee, you can sleep when you're dead." There are moments when I get confused about coffee too, particularly on certain days walking from my office to the house with my laptop and the empty coffee cup in hand. I know I'm supposed to do something with both. My brain tells me to put the laptop in the microwave and connect the coffee cup to the printer. My spirit says other. Bad dog. Daily medications and legal limits serve to slow the progression of the disease and help to control the rage on days when I hurl the phone across the room, a perfect strike to the sink, because in the moment I don't remember how to dial, or when I smash the lawn sprinkler against an oak tree in the backyard because I don't recall how it works, or when I push open a flaming hot glass door to the family room wood stove barehanded to stroke the fire just because I thought it was a good idea until my skin melts in a second-degree burn, or when I cry privately the tears of a little boy because I fear I'm alone, nobody cares, and the innings are starting to fade. Years ago, I thought I was Clark Kent, Superman, an award-winning journalist who feared nothing. But today, I feel more like a baffled Jimmy Olsen, and on days of muddle, more like Mr. Magoo, the wispy cartoon character who couldn't see straight, exacerbated by a stubbornness to acknowledge a problem, or as I had mentioned before, Mr. Potato Head, with the wacky pushpins and all, or like a codfish landed on a dock. A fish rots from the head down. Daily exercise and writing are my sucre to reboot and reduce confusion. So I try to stay locked in as a missile is on target, but locked in likewise is a medical term in which an individual who cannot speak because of paralysis communicates through the blink of an eye. Some days I find myself between definitions, using every available memory device and strategy, cerebral and handheld, to communicate. Hey, I'm not stupid, folks, nor are others with Alzheimer's. We just have a disease, a cunning enemy we must fight 24/7. Alzheimer's indeed is a disease that runs in circles and eventually meanders for a kill. It's analogous to the prototypical arcade game Pac-Man, in which a pie-faced yellow icon navigates a maze of challenges, eating Pac-Dots to get to the next level. While the iconic video game was designed to have no ending, there are no power pellets in Alzheimer's to consume the enemies of ghosts, goblins, and monsters, as my Pac-Man in slow motion consumes brain cells one by one. Game over. Not always if one is willing to fight with the gut instincts and the help of individuals like you. My mother taught me how to fight. She wouldn't give in. In life and death, she is my role model. And her inspiration, in her spirit, she guides me today. And sometimes in the most unusual circumstances. Recently, my wife and I were flown to L.A. to speak to a Hollywood group of about 1,000 people at an Alzheimer's event where the Golden Globe Awards are hosted. They were all A-listers. I was nervous before going on the stage, then told myself to calm down, that I'm doing this for Mom, who died of Alzheimer's, as you know, and I was her family caregiver. I heard that soft voice inside. Call it my mother, call it God, the universe, whatever, but I heard the voice. Greg, you rock this. You just rock this. And so at the podium, I rocked it. As I spoke, I noticed a woman standing behind me to the right. I felt she was there for encouragement and support. I had a good, calm feeling about it. Several times I wanted to turn around to see who it was, but I just felt, stay focused, stay focused. After my speech, I turned around, and the woman was gone. Later, I asked my wife, Mary Catherine, who was that woman standing next to me? She paused. Greg, there was no woman. There was no woman on the stage. No, I said, the woman to my right. Who was she? There was a woman standing behind me. Greg, there was no woman. Everyone at the table said, there was no woman. I believe my mother was on the stage that night with me at Sardi's, and likely the souls of those in Hollywood who have died from Alzheimer's. And, you know, they must have had a kick-ass after party, which I wish I could have attended. My time will come. Mom was always one for emphasis. She never thought I got it. So just after the speech, Still Alice, the film producer, Elizabeth Gelfand Stearns, sent a text with a photo of me on stage to my good friend Lisa Genova, who wrote the book. And the text said, Greg is ripping it up at Sardi's. He is my rock star. Lisa calls me Alice without the dress, but we're not going there today. Perhaps my mom thought I still needed to be whacked in the head. So that Saturday at Los Angeles Airport, at a restaurant awaiting a flight back to Boston, my wife gasped as she looked up at a television commercial on the screen. The caption read, "For those who rock." 2 weeks after that, I gave a speech on Cape Cod Canal to about 500 people who were doing a walk and along the canal for Alzheimer's. And when you went through the starting line, there was a woman holding a sign. And as I walked by, I looked at it, and it said, "You rock." So do you believe in angels? I do. You know, I can't talk to you about medicine today. All I did in high school was cut up a frog, but my sister Maureen was a nurse, and I have high honor for nurses in the medical profession. But I can talk to you things about the heart, about angels, however you want to define them. Memory. Is it all that it's cracked up to be? Quote, memory is everything. Without it, we're nothing, observed neuroscientist Eric Kandel, winner of the 2000 Nobel Prize for his groundbreaking research. Cell by cell, Kandel took the brain apart. Had he dug a bit deeper, he may have found that memory isn't all that it's cracked up to be. While memory offers delineating concept and perspective, it doesn't define us. Definition is found in the spirit and the soul, but one must dig for it. An unexamined life, Socrates once said, is not worth living. Einstein once said, memory is deceptive, colored by today's events. How long was that home run you hit in high school, and how big was that fish you caught, and was that prom dress all that pretty? We tend to remember what we want to remember. My brain used to be my best friend. Now I see no chance for reconciliation. So I've learned to find new pathways. I've learned how to write and speak from the heart, the place of the soul that survives forever as the executive side of me continues to fade. In Alzheimer's, mental and physical fatigue increases. Restlessness can lead to pacing and wandering because an individual can't sleep, a stage that I'm in right now. And with this disease, the sun rises and sets on a foggy bottom, a haze at times that precludes one, among other things, from recognizing familiar faces. But you have to find the humor in all this. Filter, filter, filter. It's the filter thing, as I talked to you about before. You know, Alzheimer's steals your memory, then robs your filter. That's not all that bad because you get to say things others were thinking but were afraid to say. Noise and confusion can trigger a greater loss of filter as the brain cannot discern the sounds where they are coming from, pushing one into moments of rage and bad judgment. There are many moments of note, but one recently was at Logan Airport. I was traveling with my wife and son to California, and we went into the airport, and right away the noise was very disconcerting. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And you forgive me for saying this because there's a lot of women in the room, and I'm just an Irish Mick, but I want to be the guy, I know that's not correct to say today, but or politically correct, but I want to be the husband, the father, the guy to fix it, and I can't be the guy anymore. I have to rely on others. So in the old days, when you flew, they actually took care of you. You gave them the bags, and they put tags on them, and pat on the back, and you went off and got your plane. Now, you walk in, and there's this thing that looks like R2-D2, and you got to punch it, and it's just really confusing. So my wife is up there, and that would have been me as the guy, and now I'm feeling bad, and I want to be the guy. So the only thing I can think to say is, it's not working. And she said, what? As she's frantic, I go, it's just not working. And she goes, shh. And I said, no, it's not working. She said, would you be quiet? It is not working. So in the airport, you're supposed to have your quiet voice. And in Alzheimer's, I don't have a quiet voice anymore. So I said, see, it's not working. Well, heads are turning, and all of a sudden, the security is coming over, and this woman comes to me, and stocky, woman, and she says, what's the matter? And I said, it's not working. And my wife said, yes, it is. And I said, no, it's not. And so she went up, and the attendant, and did something, and I said, see, it's not working. So minutes later, she prints out these tags that you put on your luggage, the bag tags. She hands them to me. And I said, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? Now, it's my loud voice. And she goes, you put them on your bags. And I paused. In my loudest possible voice, I said, am I supposed to fly the fucking plane too? So whistles, alarms, going off, and you got to laugh at it. My son turns around and goes, can we go home now? Connor is sitting in the front row, who you saw in the film. I'll tell you another story, because I want you to laugh at this disease, because if you can't laugh at an enemy, the enemy owns you, okay? And I don't want your pity. I want your support for all of you. So I'll tell you another funny story. So you got to look for the light side. So one of the things in Alzheimer's is a loss of continence. You nurses understand how that works. And so you'll never really see me with light pants anymore. So we're flying back from someone out for another trip to California. This time I'm just with my wife. And we're over Chicago or somewhere. And she says, go to the bathroom. It's just like my mother. And so I said, no. She says, go to the bathroom. And I said, no. She said, go to the bathroom or you're going to pee in your pants. Well, now people nearby are like, they want to be part of this conversation, and they're listening. So I said, okay. And so I got up, and the dessert cart or whatever the hell they call that was behind me, and I couldn't go to the back of the plane. So I said, see, I can't go to the bathroom. She said, go up in first class. I go, you can't go up in first class. I mean, we have any Jewish people? I love the Jewish people. We have any Jewish people in here? They would get this, hopefully. But the curtain there is like the veil in the ancient temple, and you get struck by lightning if you go in there. So I go in, and the attendant is looking at me. I'll mix my metaphors like I just burnt down a convent full of nuns, and I just said I got a problem, and she could tell. It wasn't a drinking thing. She could tell my brain wasn't all there. And I said, I got to go to the bathroom. So she goes, all right. And now, because of all this processing, I was on Pluto. I was just very disorientated. And so I said, where is it? It's right behind me. So I look behind her, and there are two doors. One on the left and one in the middle. And I felt like, Monty Hall, let's make a deal. What door do you want? Do I take the door on the left or do I take the door in the middle? So I grabbed the door in the middle, okay? That's the cockpit door. So all of a sudden, all these alarms go off, and I explained my situation. She goes, just get back, and she walked me back. And so I get back to the chair, and I look at my wife, and my loud voice, I said, see what you did to me? I almost got thrown off the plane. Now everyone's listening. And she said, why? And I said, because I put my hand on the cockpit. Well, so I'm sure these people had some stories when they got home, you know. Getting back to my mother, there were I noticed with her when they moved to the Cape, there were some warning signs, and we're all want to be in denial. You know, there's a chapter of my book, Mark Twain quote, "Denial ain't just a river in Egypt," and we all want to do the drive-bys, and it's almost like we just want to say, and it upsets me a lot of times because I told you I got cancer too, and people want to talk about cancer. I don't want to talk about cancer, and they go, oh, you look good and you're in shape, and I go, my mind's not. You're not getting it. You're not getting it, and it's like, do you ever say to someone, you go by and you just want to do the drive-by, and you say, how you doing? And then they go, not very well. And you go, oh, shit, now I got to talk to them. Yeah. But that's what happens. And so over time, my mom began sticking knives into sockets and hiding money, wads of it, and brushing her teeth with liquid soap and refusing to shower and not recognizing people she had known all her life, and serving my father coffee grinds at dinner time. And yet she unremittingly cared for my father, who had dementia also, and he had prostate cancer and circulation, and she kept fighting it, and she was a role model to me. Then late one Sunday in 2006, many years ago, the disease began to overtake her, and I brought my mother a photo of all of her children from a recent family reception, and she couldn't recognize one of them. She had no clue. She was still driving at the time. As I left my parents' house that night, I could only think of the jarring injection in the movie Jaws when Chief Brody first encountered the mammoth shark. We're going to need a bigger boat. All we had was a dinghy, and my mom was at the tipping point. She was at the tipping point, and it wasn't long before I moved to the beginning of the tipping point. The baton from my mom to me was passed on a summer day on a bicycle ride from Brewster to Eastham along the Cape Cod Bike Trail. I had taken my young son Connor and one of his friends on a 15-mile trek to visit my mom. It was a pastoral passage beside sparkling cranberry bogs, lush meadows, saltwater marshes, and freshwater ponds. In all ways, it was a cleansing, majestic day. Mom, however, was more muddled than usual. With the temperature inching toward 80, she scolded us for not wearing our winter coats. You know, it's one of the things in Alzheimer's that it can destroy your internal thermostat. And there are times I wear inappropriate things, and people are asking me, what am I doing? It just feels right. And so to take the chill off, she insisted the boys don these heavy, oversized sweatshirts from a spare room. When sweatshirts were real, now they're T-shirts. But and the boys balked at first, but then they obliged because Connor knew his grandmother wasn't well. And I told him when we left the driveway, you can give them to me. And we got back on the bike trail, and I draped them across my handlebars as we were headed back to Brewster. And I was taking in the panorama of primal nature. I myself hadn't realized it completely was in the initial throes and symptoms of this disease. And along the way, I was euphoric in the Zen, incredibly at peace in the early stage of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's often will take you back to childhood, and I felt like a kid again and plied the trail at full speed far ahead of Connor, faster and faster. The wind was soothing, and the moment I recalled that as a youth I had prided myself on riding a red 3-speed Schwinn racer, no-handed. And like a child, I wasn't wearing a helmet that day. For 30 seconds, I pedaled back in time, a kaleidoscope of images from youth. Rye Beach on Long Island Sound in New York, the ball fields at Disbro Park, the town marina, out to the American Yacht Club where one could drink in the Manhattan skylight and the Twin Towers in New York City. Then, as abrupt as a clap of thunder, the imagery shifted. I sensed something awry. In horrifying slow motion, what seemed like frame by frame, I witnessed my sweatshirts on the handlebars slowly slip into the spokes. My bike at full gallop stopped on a dime, and I was hurled headfirst over the handlebars, about 15 feet into the air, but with the presence of mind at least to shield my left hand over my forehead before the impact. I hit the tarmac with the force it seemed like a .45 caliber bullet, the impact cutting deep into my knuckles, right through to the bone. On the second bounce, my face hit the pavement in a pool of blood. I was numb, out of body, yet felt something cold pouring down my face. As I finally stood up, I must have looked like the lead role in a Bela Lugosi movie. In pure fright, Connor and his friends sprinted for help. 2 Samaritans sitting on a nearby back deck came to my aid and collected the kids. The rest is fleeting. A half hour later, I was rushed to Cape Cod Hospital in an ambulance, sirens ablaze. After multiple stitches to the head and left hand, I was discharged. But little did I know I had unleashed a monster. You know, fast forward, as my mom slipped, we had to put her in the nursing home, and it was a very sad day for me. And right after my father died, and I remember when my father died, she looked at me and said, as plain as day, even though there were times she couldn't complete a sentence, I don't know how much longer I want to be here. And I think sometimes God gives you that opportunity. And I got angry with God the other day, and I got to watch my F-bombs here. I had the WTF talk with God. And I said, what the hell? Do you know who I am? You know, you gave me clinical depression as a boy. You gave me Alzheimer's. You gave me cancer. You gave me spinal stenosis and scoliosis. I don't have any feeling in my hands and feet. And at the time, I had walking pneumonia. I go, WTF. And I don't know about you, and I'm mixing geographies here, but I want to, and there is no deflate gate, but I want to coach like Bill Belichick. I'm just saying. But I want to coach like Bill Belichick, who just, do your job. And so I heard I said, do you know who I am? And I heard back from God. I believe it was God. I heard back clear as day in language that I use. Yes, dumbass, I made you. And I have you right where I want you. So I said, okay. And it's not your time. So I said, okay, well, I just needed to know you were there. We can go do some things. So, but when I got the call, and my mother, she was ready. She had fought the fight. And she had passed the baton to me and taught me along the way. And I was at my mother's bedside in the nursing home. I got a call from a nurse about 10 o'clock at night. Your mother's not doing well, the nurse said. She's scared. She needs you. I raced to the nursing home about 2 miles away down a dirt road through the woods, hitting all the potholes in my yellow Jeep from the trot of horses on this country way, rear wheel sliding to the left, then the right as I pressed ahead. When I arrived minutes later, as my mother was in a deep sleep, I woke her just to let her know she was not alone. Mom, I'm here. Sorry to wake you, but I wanted you to know I'm here. She smiled again. There was a countenance about her that said something was about to happen. She seemed more alert, more at peace. She was speaking from the heart. Her father, we called him Daddy George. There was a photo of him I put at the foot of her bed, and he was glancing down tenderly from this framed photo on the wall. He was staring right at her. I felt his presence in the room. I put my left hand over my mother's left hand, and as she lay in bed, slowly she put her right hand on top of my hand as we talked. And we talked on the steps of death. And I waited there until she fell back to sleep. Then I kissed her on the forehead as I prepared to leave. Her green eyes opened wide. She said, plain as day, Greg, where are you going? In a soft voice. Knowing in my soul what was about to happen, I sat back down, held her hand, and looked into her eyes and said, Mom, I'm not going anywhere. We're riding this one out together. I stayed by her side until she fell asleep. Then I kissed her on the forehead, knowing the long kiss goodbye was over. She never opened her eyes again. Please, never stop speaking from your heart. You know, finally, we can learn allegiance from the words of others. The Irish like to say, never get mad, get even. And so I'm getting even with Alzheimer's, but not for me. The train has left. But for my children, for you and your children, and for a generation of baby boomers, their families and loved ones who face this demon prowling like Abaddon. We can all learn from playwright George Bernard Shaw, who prophetically said, quote, life is no brief candle. It's sort of a splendid torch, which I got to hold for a moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it to a future generation. So I encourage all of you to continue burning your candles bright. Perhaps Ernest Hemingway said it best, quote, the world breaks everyone, and afterwards some are strong in the broken places. Be strong in the broken places. God bless you.
Greg has time for a few questions, and what a heartfelt presentation. We appreciate your wisdom. So we have two mics. Tim has one, and there's one right there. Cindy, would you mind taking that mic? And I'll point out, and so if we have any questions. Yeah, right over there.
Hi. I just wanted to know, do you feel like your family saw some changes in you before you did? Did they tell you about that, or did you notice these changes before they did?
Well, I'll tell you what happened, and then maybe I'll have my son Connor come up and answer that question. Because I was my mom's caregiver and witnessed my grandfather, I wanted to deny it, and then until it got to the point where I couldn't function. And as a journalist, like all of you, in what you do, you have to multitask, and I couldn't do my job, and I had to get help. And that's when I started, letting the curtain down. And then after that, I had the serious head injury, and it got worse, and had the brain scan, SPECT scan, clinical test, diagnosis, and the gene test. And the doctor said, you got to tell your family. And so it was a tough talk, and I got them all at the house, under the guise of going to dinner. And my wife said, your father wants to tell you something. And so I made it brief, and I talked to the kids, and I said, well, remember your grandmother, your great-grandfather. And I said, now it's come for me. And one of the first things that they said, or I think it was Brendan, well, that explains a lot. And that's what happened. That explains a lot. Then in a wrenching scene, which I write about in my book, in Alzheimer's, that they want you to give everything up. I'm not supposed to own anything. There's a 5-year look back for the nursing home, and so I don't own anything anymore. And Brendan needed to see the medical paperwork and power of attorney and all that stuff. And we were out at a family gathering in Coronado off San Diego, and I got there early with Brendan and went to dinner, and we're on the deck, the balcony of overlooking paradise. And so there's no perfect time to go into detail, not even in paradise, but I thought, okay, I got to talk to him. And he didn't want to see any of the paperwork. he just said, this is bullshit, Dad. And there were a few other expletives, but I think I've used my quota of F-bombs, yeah. I'd be asked to leave. And he just was yelling and screaming. I said, no, read it. And he said, this is bullshit, this is bullshit, this is BS, this is BS, and on the expletives. And then I said, well, you should read this. And he said, this is BS, this is BS. And finally he took my 50 pages of medical records, and he ripped them up, and he threw them off the balcony. And then he said, this is expletive, expletive, expletive. And it is because I know it's true. And then like a little boy, he put his head in my chest and cried. Now, the next day, being the Irishman that I am, I realized that all my medical records that I was losing my brain were strewn all over paradise. So I got a plastic trash bag and picked up the remnants of all that, and the irony was not lost, putting all of that into a trash bag. And Connor, come up here for a minute and just talk. It's my son Connor. So Connor, as I was for my mother, Connor is the guy, the go-to guy for me. So I don't know about that, but yeah, a lot of people out there. So just
Somebody have a question, or?
no. The question is here. I'll ask the question. What did in noticing your dad? What were some of the things you noticed, and how's the family handling it, and what would you like your dad to say and do more?
No, you pretty much wrapped it up. I mean, it was a relief when he told us. He started doing, goofy stuff and just things that just didn't really, kind of make sense. And so, when he sat us down, like my dad said, it was tough, but it was, kind of a relief. We kind of, sat back and said, okay, this is why Dad puts his freaking cell phone in the refrigerator, or just puts his business cards in the dishwasher, so, which he's done a couple times. So yeah, it was a relief. It was sad, but at least we had an answer to why he was acting, not crazy, but just doing a lot of things that just out of the norm. So.
Other questions? I'll answer, and then Connor will give you his answer. I withdraw myself, and there was a time not too long ago where I lose things. It's not like there's a difference in Alzheimer's, by the way, between losing your car keys and not knowing you have a car, and there's a difference between not remembering where your car is parked and not knowing you have a car. And there was a while ago on Cape Cod, we take our trash to the dump. It's kind of a rite of passage. I know in civilized places they come and collect your trash, but Cape Cod's kind of rural. And so I was driving my yellow Jeep, and I dropped the trash off, and I said, okay, well, how do I get home? And I said, well, I'd call my wife or Connor or a friend, and I was driving a yellow Jeep. It was sitting right in front of me. In the moment, my mind would not tell me that was my car. And when the light goes back on, someone in the kitchen turns it back on, you get very angry because you get angry at that shouldn't happen, and so you're really pissed. And there was a time, and Connor knows this, again, not too long ago, where I had losing my iPhone, like second, boom, boom. It's like losing a thought in a second. It's just gone. It's never coming back. So I didn't. About the 30th time I lost my iPhone. And Alzheimer's is, I think a lot of you know, you also get very paranoid. So I'm thinking someone stole it. So now I'm mad at Connor. I'm mad at Mary Catherine. And where is it? And Connor is trying to calm me down, as he always does. And he says, Dad, maybe it's in the car. And so now I go out in the car, and Connor's calling it, and I hear it, but because I can't distinguish noises sometimes where they're coming, it sounded like it was in the front seat, the back seat, under the hood, and so now I'm, like a blind man, just feel, because it vibrates too, and until I found it, searching, and I felt the vibration, and so you would think, I was happy, but I could have bought another cell phone, but I was angry because of what this disease is doing. So I was so angry I had to hurt something, and that's what I worry about in this disease. I'll never hurt anyone else, but I worry about hurting myself. And so I had to throw something. So there was a coffee cup in the car, which I thought was my favorite coffee cup. I was informed later it was my wife's favorite coffee cup. And I hurled it at a stone wall, and it was a perfect strike, almost like a distance from pitcher's mound to home plate. I threw it left-handed. I'm right-handed. I was in so much anger that I did it, and finally I looked up in the sky, and I said, Alzheimer's, if you want me now, come take me. And then I stormed in the house, and right by my wife. And then I opened the door, and she's crying, and she goes, I know it's not you, it's the disease. And we cried together, and then I said, I got some unfinished business. And I went out, I looked up into heaven and said to Alzheimer's, I said, screw you, you can't have me today. And then I went back inside. So.
Any other questions? Let's give Greg OBrien and Connor a big round of applause.